So welcome everybody. Like I said, happy Friday. My name is Jason Siko, and we're going to take a moment to let some people in and then get rolling. And today we're going to talk about removing barriers to learning with technology. And throughout this presentation, we're going to talk not only about technical solutions for removing barriers to learning, but also some low-tech or no-tech solutions. So it's really more about a philosophical approach to teaching and learning with respect to removing barriers. Just as we know, this is part of the Summer Learning Blitz. We have a month-long series, and we are going to be every day, 1 or 2 sessions. This is part of the technology track on Fridays. They stuck me on Fridays. And I also have one other session on the 30th about digital footprints and how to, both for teachers and students, to be wary of what they post on social media. So that is the sessions I'm in charge of, but it's all month long in a variety of tracks related to a variety of topics in teaching and learning. Again, I want to introduce myself. My name is Jason Siko. I'm an instructional technology consultant here at Wayne Risa. You can see my contact information here, and I will also post this as well as a link to the slide deck at the end. Again, just kind of a last call here as people are coming in. Please take a moment to sign in if you want sketches. The link there, and this will be in the slide deck if you need to know your pick. I can put that in there as well, but you need to be able to put your pick in if you want sketches. And so it's just a short Google form, and we'll handle the processing from there. And again, lastly, some video conference norms before we begin. We've been in the pandemic for over 2 years, going on year 3. It's hard to believe. And so we've all become accustomed to virtual interactions. And so just a few things. Remember to keep your microphone muted unless you're speaking. Turn off your webcam if you're experiencing any delays, technical delays. Use the chat bar for questions. I have that popped up. And then if you're having any other technical difficulties, feel free to hop off and hop back on if you need to change computers, change connections, or anything like that. So again, last call for sign in, and let's move forward. So as part of this whole Summer Learning Blitz, our real goal here is thinking about the whole child. And this one's especially important because we're talking about not teaching to the middle. We're talking about teaching for all learners in ways that we can adapt our teaching and learning and our instruction to meet the needs of all learners. And this is part of the whole child concept, our improving learning and improving health in all these facets of teaching and learning. So moving forward here, this is kind of the working philosophy of this whole month. The promotion of social, emotional, academic learning is not a shifting educational fad. It is the substance of education itself. And like I said at the beginning, this is really about a philosophical adjustment to how you approach lesson design. And to begin, I'm going to show a short video on this concept, which is also often called universal design for learning, although we are going to touch on a variety of topics. At the heart of all this is universal design for learning. And I should note that I'm not a huge showing video person when I do my presentations, but I find this one and a second one that we'll be watching incredibly useful. So just in the chat or in the beginning, if you make sure you can hear, give me a thumbs up.
So let's say you're a teacher who needs to reach a curriculum goal, and you've got a diverse group of students. Well, so does this teacher. And this one. Most do. In fact, research shows that the way people learn is as unique as their fingerprints. What does this mean for teachers today? Classrooms are highly diverse, and curriculum needs to be designed from the start to meet this diversity. Universal design for learning is an approach to curriculum that minimizes barriers and maximizes learning for all students. For a better understanding, let's unpack the term universal design for learning. First is the word universal. By universal, we mean curriculum that can be used and understood by everyone. Each learner in the classroom brings his or her own background, strengths, needs, and interests. Curriculum should provide genuine learning opportunities for each and every student. Now let's think of the word learning. Learning is not one thing. Neuroscience tells us that our brains have three broad networks. One for recognition, the what of learning. One for skills and strategies, the how of learning. One for caring and prioritizing, the why of learning. Students need to gain knowledge, skills, and enthusiasm for learning, and a curriculum needs to help them do all three. But every learner is unique, and one size does not fit all. So how do we make a curriculum that challenges and engages diverse learners? This is where the word design comes in. A universally designed building is planned to be flexible and accommodate for all kinds of users with and without disabilities. It turns out that if you design for those in the margins, your building turns out better for everyone. Curb cuts and ramps are used by people in wheelchairs, people with strollers, and people on bikes. Captioning on TV serves people who are deaf, people learning English, people in gyms, and spouses who get to sleep at different times. UDL takes this idea and applies it to the design of flexible curriculum. UDL goes beyond access because we need to build in support and challenge. So how do we use the UDL framework to make learning goals, methods, materials, and assessments that work for everyone? First, ask yourself, what is my goal? What do I want my students to know, do, and care about? Then ask, what barriers in the classroom might interfere with my diverse students' ability to reach these goals? To eliminate the barriers, use these three UDL principles to create flexible paths to learning so that each student can progress. Number 1, provide multiple means of representation. Present content and information in multiple media, and provide varied supports. Use graphics and animation, highlight the critical features, activate background knowledge, and support vocabulary so students acquire the knowledge being taught. Number 2, provide multiple means for action and expression. Give students plenty of options for expressing what they know, and provide models, feedback, and supports for their different levels of proficiency. Number 3, provide multiple means of engagement. What fires up one student won't fire up another. Give students choices to fuel their interest and autonomy. Help them risk mistakes and learn from them. If they love learning, they'll persist through challenges. And remember, always keep in mind the learning goal. Get rid of barriers caused by the curriculum and instead keep the challenge where it belongs. And that's it. Okay, quick recap. Show the information in different ways, allow your students to approach learning tasks and demonstrate what they learn in different ways, and offer options that engage students and keep their interest. Universal design for learning equals learning opportunities for all. For more information about UDL, go to www.cast.org.
So, and again, I'm sure if how many of you have had experience with universal design for learning. So one other way to think about universal design is to kind of show a little bit of a Venn diagram with differentiated instruction. And the analogy that's commonly used to compare the two or contrast the two is the dinner party analogy. And in one scenario, which would be the differentiated instruction method, is to figure out if you're having 10 people over for dinner, figure out what each person wants, what each person needs to have with respect to food allergies or food preferences, and then make 10 dishes to meet the needs of those individual eaters or guests at your party. Whereas the universal design takes a more broad approach and actually designs a buffet, and you just include lots of variety and cover all your bases that way. So sometimes people want to have other dishes, or some people are flexible. Sometimes people say they're vegetarian, but then they're kind of not very strict and they want meat instead. So there's lots of different ways to describe the differences, but universal design for learning, from a dinner party analogy, is really about providing options and making sure you're meeting the needs of all your guests through those options. In terms of universal design thinking, one thing, and this is standard instructional design, is figure out first, what do we know about the learners and what do we know about the context? What do they bring to the table? What possible supports might they need? What types of barriers do they frequently come into contact with? And do that work up front, i.e. at the beginning of the school year, but frequently revisit that. Then think about, what are we here to do? And that's what the video talked about. What are your goals? What are your learning outcomes, for lack of a better term? Between those two, you should be able to identify potential barriers to learning, and then remove those barriers or provide supports to overcome those barriers. Then start planning your learning, do the actual instruction, evaluate, revise, and then start over, because these will evolve over time. Students at the beginning of the year are much different than the same students at the end of the year. So this is an iterative process. But think about those key first two steps. What are your learning outcomes, and what is the results of our learner analysis find out? And based on those, you should be able to identify potential barriers to learning and work to remove those. The main thing here is that you have to think not only about the instruction, which we'll get to, but also the environment yourself. And so again, I'm not a big video person, but I think this one is very useful in getting that mindset across. Universal design has its roots in architecture. And when they talk about universal design, they're really talking about buildings. And that's why they have to say universal design for learning, to take it that step further. As we watch this video, what I'd like you to think about is, as we start getting back to school in the next few weeks, and as we start decorating our classroom or putting our classroom together, what's possibly, and please put this in the chat as you watch the video, what's one possible change you can make to your classroom and or work area, if you're working in a varied environment, that would improve the design and make it more accessible for your learners?
Designed Ed Roberts campus to explain what the researchers called the 7 principles of universal design. This is Power On. Principle 1, equitable use. A building that is universally designed is a building that's designed for people with all kinds of abilities. That's a general idea of a universally designed building. Now, for a lot of people that live in cities, the only way to get around is via public transportation. So we're going to jump on BART, which is the public transportation system around the San Francisco Bay Area, and see where it takes us. So we've made it to the Ashby station, and connected to the station is the building that houses the Ed Roberts campus. All we do is go in this elevator, we go up 1 story, and it opens right into the lobby. This is Ed Roberts campus, an 85,000 square foot building that houses disability-focused organizations. Named after disability rights pioneer and former executive director at the CIL, Ed Roberts campus has won numerous awards for its accessible design. Designers often tack on a ramp as an afterthought, but the team at LMS Architecture started with accessibility and turned the ramp into the building's centerpiece. On the wall behind the ramp, a gallery of photos show Berkeley's deep history in the disability rights movement. The second principle of universal design is flexibility in use, meaning that a building can be configured in various ways to accommodate a person's needs. In some of the offices, you might find adjustable desks, which can be used at any height depending on each person's preference. Roberts campus, mark your calendars for April 27th and join us right here for the annual Momentum.
Okay, so we're getting some great discussion in the chat. And if you are in the future someone who's watching the recording of this, please take a moment and think about your own classroom and things that you could do. We've got some great discussion in the chat, mainly related to special needs students, but this can apply to anyone. Think about younger children and some of their needs. Think about your English learners and some of their specific needs. But just think about the variations in how rooms could be arranged, or even just removing the unnecessary clutter to make things more clear and precise. Those are also things that are helpful. Moving on, again, this is a technology presentation, so let's talk about a couple things that would help all learners do a little bit better in their understandings of content, or just kind of remove those barriers to learning. A lot of people, when they do digital presentations, be it a PowerPoint or just anything on a computer screen, these are some things that you want to make sure that you're paying attention to. First of all, if it's a digital presentation, pay attention to the font. Research has shown that sans serif font, which is more of a, I guess I'll say more of a blockier type font, as opposed to, let's say, what you would see if you were reading a novel, a paperback novel. Serif font, like Times New Roman, has little little fringe things on the edges of the letter. Just look at the differences between the I and the F in sans serif and serif on that picture. And then also remove goofy fonts, or try to avoid them at all cost. Obviously, there's times for fun, but also try to limit them when the content is being presented. And you have to think about it this way. Let's say you have a learner who is not identified as having any special needs, but is possibly reading below grade level. You want to remove as many barriers as possible. If they're having trouble seeing or interpreting words, you're just adding an extra barrier. So do the best to make that font or that reading more accessible. Same thing with size, try to make sure that the size of the text is appropriate for the situation. If you're presenting on a screen versus maybe a television screen versus a big projector versus their own laptops, yes, you need to adjust the font size and take those considerations into account. Another one is contrast. Generally speaking, the best level of contrast is a dark font on a light but not white background. And you can even see just, at your screen, look at the first two boxes and notice it's clear. But notice the third one that has the I don't know, taupe background, I guess, is a bit easier on the eyes. The other thing you can do is use a contrast checker, and I'll put a link to one in the chat. A contrast checker helps you plug in colors or get colors from a font deck and see if the contrast meets WCAG online website standards. And you're generally looking for a ratio, I think it's of 2.5 to 1 or greater in terms of dark to light. So that's a nice tool to use. There are also some Google add-ons that you can add that will flag areas where contrast is not strong enough. And then the other thing to remember is that you don't know if your students, or may not know if your students are colorblind. And so try to avoid the common combinations of color blindness, the red, green, the blue, green, and the yellow, red. And again, just staring at those probably makes your eyes hurt a little bit. So avoid them. Another one is just think about general cognitive load. In the video, the first video, they talked about making sure you're using graphs and pictures where necessary, but really try to limit the information on a slide or a text or a page to whatever the students need. Again, sometimes we like to put some fun and entertaining things in there, but try to limit it and then use pictures as necessary. And the analogy I often use, hence the pictures, is the Parmesan cheese analogy. For those of you who eat cheese, Parmesan cheese, when it's fresh off a grated block and use a microplane to put a little bit on, you only need a little bit. So think about that versus taking the Kraft Parmesan cheese, which is 40% cellulose anyway, and dumping it on your pile of spaghetti just to bury the flavor or mask the flavor of the spaghetti sauce. So use a little bit of the high quality stuff versus a ton or a bucket of the low quality information. Just some other ones here, and I'm going to back out of the presentation too. I'll talk about these quickly, and then I'll show examples of them. Alt text, for those of your students who have vision disabilities, alt text is where you provide a kind of a caption or a background description of an image. So if they are visually impaired, they can hover over it with their screen reader and it will tell them what the picture is. Closed captioning, you should notice that the difference in the two videos I showed, the first one was not closed caption, but the second one was. And that the first video talked about some benefits for closed captioning. Even if you aren't hearing or visually impaired, those are the things where, hey, maybe it's a loud classroom, maybe you are in a larger room, maybe it is a little bit louder. Those are things that help. There are tons of translation tools. I'll talk about a couple, but there are many out there. Speech to text. So if students are struggling with typing, they can speak out what they're trying to put down on paper, and that will record it. Headings, we'll show that in a second. The one I have crossed out is click here. This is when you're trying to present information or students are reading things and it says click here for more information. Generally, students who have screen readers and have those types of tools writing that out is very difficult. It should be click on the following link and then maybe either have a link or actually put the whole URL there. And the other thing is, particularly with Google Docs, but also with Microsoft products, there are different accessibility features that you can use. And so let me just show a few of those. Let me go back to back a slide here, and I will go ahead and click on this. And if I go to format options, or I'm sorry, if I go to alt text, I can actually put in a title and make it descriptive. I mean, I'm not going to put too much here. A hand pudding sprinkling Parmesan, if I'm going to spell this right, Parmesan cheese on a plate of pasta. So that way, if somebody is visually impaired, they can click on it with their screen reader and it's already programmed to let them know what that picture is of. Closed captioning. Obviously YouTube has a variety of languages for which it will translate into. Another one that does a good job is MI StreamNet, which we have free to us in the state of Michigan through the REMC Association. So just to give you an example, here's a quick video. But one of the things I can do here is in the closed caption settings, I can change the language that's being presented, so it actually translates very well.
Thank you for joining me today.
And you can see in the upper corner here, they have
engagement specialist for the Michigan
not only English
Library.
translations but Arabic translations as well.
By the Midwest
a few others. Google Translate and add-ons. There's a couple here, like I'll just pull up a random Google Doc here and I'll show a couple things here. I can take this document and go under Google Docs and go into tools, and you can see translate document. And so I'm going to just scroll until I hit one, and I'll put, I don't know, I guess Ukrainian, and it'll translate. And you can see here it automatically translated. So with 2 clicks, a student, or if you know you have a large population that speaks a particular language, you can very easily create duplicate copies of things. And to take that a step further, to not provide at least a little anonymity, you could provide assignments in Google Classroom. You could provide the English document to a set of students and then assign the document in a different language to a different set of students. Those are things that they can do, or they could just do it themselves if you teach them how. A few others, headings. Headings are really important for not only screen readers, but also just to get in the habit of not just bolding things that you want. Like many times when we're writing a document, we'll take something and we'll just say, okay, this is my heading. I'm just going to make it bold and I'm going to make it bigger. And that's fine. But you really should get in the habit of, if you have a heading, use the heading features in Word or Google Docs. That helps not only to create some variation in the style for struggling readers, but also for those who have vision impairments. They can the screen readers will pick that up and say second level heading or first level heading. And then, like I said, accessibility changes. If you go to here, you could see accessibility settings. You could turn on screen reader support, turn on Braille support. All these things are available if they have the third-party software. You're basically just setting up the link here. And if you need more information, you can click on the question marks or the learn more. So those are things that you want to make sure that you're doing on a consistent basis, particularly if you have populations of students for which you have needs to create some accessibility options for them. And then lastly, speech to text. Let me go back to this document really quickly. If you're unfamiliar with this, I can, and I'm not sure how this is going to work if I am on a recorded call, but if you go to tools and just go to voice typing, you get a button here. I can click on it, and then you could start to possibly see that the text is appearing as I say it. And while the formatting may not be great with respect to punctuation, comma, it will allow you to do things. So at this point, I would say, are there any questions? Question mark. And you could see how easy that is to do. And that's even for teachers. Hey, sometimes it's easier to say things. How many of you use voice to text on your cell phone when you're sending text messages? There are options for this on all Google products as well as probably Microsoft products as well. I think I've covered all the ones there. Let's talk about a few more tools. Obviously, there are a ton of tools, and I put a link here, and I'll put this in the chat as well. There are tons of tools. There's too many to go over, and the whole concept of universal design and accessibility tools, you could spend weeks on. And again, I only have an hour presentation here, but there are a couple here that I think are very useful. The first one is Immersive Reader. Immersive Reader is a great tool for struggling readers, whether or not they have a certified disability or a 504 plan, or they're just need assistance with reading. For those of you who don't know, Immersive Reader comes standard on Microsoft products, but it's also available on many other online tools, and they'll let you know that they have Immersive Reader. But just some of the examples that you can have, the example page here is, of course, it's not working right now. Let me refresh that. There we go. You can see that it blots out everything, and that's an important feature to remove clutter. You can also change the text preferences, so I can make it larger. I can increase the spacing. I can change the font. And we talked about font differences. I can do backgrounds, again, to make it easier on the eyes. Grammar options. If you're working with students, you can do things like highlight nouns, verbs, and use different colors to show those depending on what you're teaching. You can even break it down to show syllables. And then reading preferences, you can also translate. So you can also line focus. You can do it on one line at a time, or paragraphs. The other piece here is that you could choose a language. And again, I'll just stop and see how it translates to. Try a different one, finish here. Depending on the text, it may not do all of them, but let's find one that works here. There we go. And you can see there it would change to it and still hold all the things that you have settings done. So again, the process of using this, and again, this is standard on all Microsoft products or things that have relationships with Microsoft, as well as a few others. For those of you who teach computer science or trying to integrate computer science into your curriculum, code.org curriculum works with Immersive Reader as well. Newsela is a news service. It provides a variety of free and paid things, but it allows you to take articles and provide them to students and assign them to students with different levels of reading. So if I go ahead and take this particular article, I can change what's called the Lexile level of it. So it tells you some things here about what it's recommended for, data is published, word count, but it can also change the actual Lexile score to actually provide the same information at a lower grade level language. And you can see here it also has read aloud, and there's opportunities to present on a screen, share, and assign. Some of their documents even have translations into Spanish. So Newsela is another one. But again, what are we doing here? We're removing barriers. You're trying to teach content, but you're also trying to make sure that you are meeting the needs of all your learners. And this gives learners some options to improve that. Mercury Reader is another one. I actually use Mercury Reader a ton. Mercury Reader is a Google Chrome extension. You can see it here in the corner here. It's a little Mercury rocket. And what you can do is you can take any type of article, and I just pulled up something here, kind of just anything here, and say, okay, you got a lot of clutter here. You got videos, you keep scrolling. There's lots of different things going on here. I just want to read the article. You click on the Mercury Reader button, and it ends up cleaning out all that. And you can see it still includes some of the images. Doesn't do it all perfect all the time, but you could see that the same text of the article is very clean. And if you go into the settings, you can actually change some of the things where, do you want it to change the text size? Do you want it sans serif or serif, or do you want it, light or dark? So all these things are options for any web page. It doesn't work 100% all the time, every page, but in a lot of websites that particularly have a lot of clutter, like ads and videos on the side, and you want to limit that, it really helps learners to really focus on what you're trying to convey to them. And the last one here is Flipgrid. Again, we can do hour-long sessions on Flipgrid by itself, but Flipgrid is just a way for students to record their thinking using either their phone or a webcam. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but really the point is, let's say you have students who are struggling writers. They can record their responses using a phone or their laptop and a webcam, and you can check their understanding, or even do summative assessment with video and audio, as opposed to having students write things out. So again, there's a variety of tools that you can use. The other piece here is, as I close things up here and get back in slideshow mode, our strategies. So, those were tools, but all in all, there are strategies that people can employ, kind of like that buffet strategy, that allow you to meet the needs of multiple learners. As some of the videos talked about, it really is boiling down to giving options and choices. So if you look at the actual universal design for learning guidelines, you could see here, and this just highlights some of the things from the video. You're really looking at the affective networks, the recognition networks, and the strategic networks. And within them, there are those, how do we provide multiple means of engagement? How do we provide multiple means of representation? And how do we provide multiple means of action and expression? So you're really talking about getting them interest, representing the knowledge, and having them demonstrate their understanding. And the bottom here is also really important. The goals of UDL is to create what's called expert learners. And it says they're expert learners who are purposeful and motivated, resourceful and knowledgeable, and strategic and goal directed. And if you go on the website, each of these boxes here, these 9 boxes have some subtopics in there. And these are things that you can look at, things that you can make changes to your lesson and try to, enhance that particular box of access and representation or whatever in those sections. So that's really what we're trying to aim for here with universal design as we try to, remove the barriers to learning. So one option that's, again, this is more of a strategy, is something called station rotation. Now, I haven't seen the breakdown of who's in the room here, but I probably have a mix of elementary and secondary students or teachers, sorry. And station rotation is just that. You have stations around the room and students can rotate. So you can provide the different options or different means of representation of knowledge for these students by having them rotate through various quote unquote stations. And some of those can be teacher led, some of those can be media led, and some of those can be group or collaborative activities. Now, during the pandemic, you could we spent a lot of time talking about how to do online stations, but the same thing can apply in a classroom where, let's say, you have one-to-one computing. Let's say the kids have iPads or the kids have Chromebooks, where in let's say 4 stations, you have one station where there's direct instruction. If it's virtual, you would meet with the students online. If it's in person, you would just have a small group activity for them. Station 2 could be something where they're working individually online. In that case, you would have maybe in Google Classroom or your learning management system, a templated assignment that they can work on individually at that station. A third station might be a collaborative station. So they're maybe working on a collaborative project, or their product when they're done on that station needs to be a group effort. And that could be something where you have a slide deck in Google Classroom that you have open editing rights. So if you're familiar with using Google Classroom or Teams for that matter, you can usually change the settings to say, no one can touch this, or you make a copy for every student, or you allow editing access of that document that you assign to the entire group rather than give them each their own individual one. You have one document or slide deck that they can all work on. And that can be a small group or whole class endeavor. So again, you're getting that collaborative activity. And then the 4th station could be something offline, or either reading something with a link where they're just working individually again, or even with just a physical product like a book, let's say. So in this new environment where we have the ability to rotate through stations, and many of us have opportunities to have lots of technology, or even at a classroom set, if not fully one-to-one, you can create a situation in your classroom where, based on the design, going back to that idea of the architecture, you could have a smooth flowing system of multiple means of representation and engagement on the content. So students who may struggle with one type are going to flourish with another. Another idea for that same idea is giving the concept of choice. With technology, one of the things we can do is promote that, particularly with learning management systems, doing something called choice boards. Now, choice boards can take a variety of shapes, as you can see on the screen there. I'll highlight a few. And if you were ever to Google whatever topic you're trying to teach, choice board, you would probably get a lot of results. So that is something that you might want to consider as well to meet the needs of multiple students. I'll make an example of this one here. And this one here is really kind of a generic one, but it's a tic-tac-toe board. And what do we know about tic-tac-toe? Obviously, you've got to get 3 in a row. And so one of the ways you could set this up is to say, hey, you got to do 3 of these, and they have to go through the center. So you have a must do, that's something that you want all your students to do. And then they have some options to do the other ones. Now, again, this takes a little bit of time to set up, but one of the things you can do with that, let's say in Google Drive, is you really just need to create it once, and then you can create templates for students and then tweak it year to year. So you can see here that a lot of these will have opportunities to do more variety in activities. And what you're doing in these is you're catering to see what students' strengths and weaknesses are and where they would most benefit from. So students who might want to do something more individualized. Some students might want to work better in groups. Some students want to do demonstrate their knowledge in writing. Some might want to record video. Some might want to be more creative. These are all different things that they could have students do to demonstrate their understanding and or learn the tool. So choice boards are a great way, a great strategy to promote these universal design principles, because you are giving students choice. Kind of highlight some of the key aspects of choice boards is, again, start with learning targets. What do you want them to know? What are your goals? What are your outcomes for your students? And then, create varying ways to impart that knowledge. So what type of resources could vary from a YouTube playlist to some text to some offline or reading or anything like that. Those are types of things that you'd want to have students look at. But they can choose which one. They can look at more than one. It can vary from unit to unit. Some students might lean toward videos for one particular topic, but then might want to read more on another topic. It really just depends. And then you vary how they demonstrate their mastery of the content. So in the design of a choice board, you want to make sure that you're always leaning toward your learning targets and the assessments, and making sure the products align with those learning targets, and then provide a variety of options for students to learn about that topic, be it from you, from the internet, from a textbook, from wherever, from their peers. And so these are things that you want to consider when designing a choice board. The last piece here about universal design is this concept of bounded autonomy. If you recall, in the universal design principles, the goal is to create what are called expert learners. And an expert learner is somebody who, and I can scroll back to that, is purposeful and motivated, so they are engaged. They're resourceful and knowledgeable. They obviously are able to learn, and strategic and goal directed. So not only are they motivated, but they're strategic, meaning that they are able to figure out what's best for them. Many times we consider students, they'll just look for the path of least resistance. They'll figure out what their friends are doing and group up with them. And that's true, which is why scaffolding is so important for universal design, because if a student hasn't had that experience before them in the past, and all of a sudden you're giving them too much autonomy, then they're going to struggle. And the best way I can think about that is, the analogy of the grocery store. If you go to a Mega Mart, there's so many choices, sometimes you don't know what you're doing. Why are stores like Trader Joe's and Aldi so successful? Well, they provide a limited number of items, and that's what you get. And because of that and their efficiency, those stores are incredibly successful, when you would think it would be the opposite. Since they have limited choices, why would I go there? So choices are good, but you have to work with students and scaffold that to help them develop metacognitively their ability to decide what's best for them. Now, will there always be students who want to take the path of least resistance? Yes. Are there ones that you're going to really have to work with to help them make good choices and the best decisions on how they learn? Yes. And that's why you have to stress the importance of scaffolding. So when you talk about a topic such as bounded autonomy, you're really trying to look at 5 components here: task, space, technique, time, and team. So, task, what are they doing? Where are they doing it? How are they doing it? Over what timeline? And who are they working with? Those are the 5 components of bounded autonomy. And again, come September, you don't want to make this open season. Yeah, you can do whatever you want, wherever you want, however you want, with whomever you want. You would want to start with a very, constrained system and slowly give them some more autonomy as the year progresses, and get their involvement in it, get them thinking, get them more reflective, because they're going to need to be able to verbalize, like, what do I value, what am I able to control, what skills do I need to work on, what skills am I already good at, and what tools are available to me. So this is not something you want to dive into at a real open season style mindset. But you really want to work to scaffold these choices, and that's the overall goal here. We're talking about creating learners who are able to make those decisions. And again, like I said, at the beginning, if you were to provide them unlimited amounts of choice, they might fall back on some of those things I mentioned, picking out what's the easiest and picking out what their friends are doing. So when we talk about universal design, we really want to place some boundaries on this and slowly loosen the reins, if you will, and give them more choice as the year progresses. The other piece here that we need to talk about is and I need to mention this as it's still a problem, is that when we talk about learning, and in the first video I said there people learn in different ways, let's take a moment and back away from that concept of learning styles. Learning styles is not something we're talking about here. I need to differentiate from that. We're not talking about that concept of, oh, I'm a visual learner, I'm a kinesthetic learner, I'm an auditory learner. That has been disproven multiple times, but also B, when you talk about topic to topic, those ideas would vary. So we're not talking about choice in terms of learning styles. We're talking about different ways to engage with content, ways to demonstrate their understanding, and ways to motivate the students. So those are what we're talking about when we're talking about expert learners and giving them choices based on the various ways we know learners learn. So at this point, I'll take a couple of minutes. Are there any questions or any other things? Let me look at the comments in the chat. And again, for those of you who are interested in learning more about bounded autonomy, I'll put a link to that article in the chat. But as we wrap up here, as we come to the end here, what are some things that other people are using? I didn't get to as I scroll back here. Mobility in the classroom to assist visual comprehension. Yes. Getting people up and moving. How do we arrange our classroom to have it a bit more free flowing so that students could move around as they see fit? We know that students can only sit for a certain amount of time. How do we address the architecture of the classroom to enable for more movement, but still have obviously desks in places for people to work? Voice typing a lot, and you're right. The comment there says it doesn't translate well sometimes because they can't speak clearly and slowly, and that's a skill that takes practice. One of the things, I mean, how many of you have done a voice to text and it didn't quite come out the way you thought it did, and you hit send, and then you look at, oh, that's not what I meant to say, and you have to correct it. Those are things that happen a lot, but that involves some discussion on, this is when I would use it, this is when I wouldn't use it, and this is when I might need to step in and help students and assist students with that. Let's look at a few others here. Pear Deck, yes, Pear Deck for interactive presentations. Again, we could do a whole hour on Pear Deck as a tool that allows for formative assessment, allows students to make interactive presentations, allows students to work in at a particular pace. Those are all things that are useful that can be done with Pear Deck. What other questions might you have, or things that you have done to assist and remove barriers? Again, this is a group here of close to 30, and even for those of you who are watching the recording in the future, jot down a couple of things that you have done to possibly remove barriers or meet some of these standards in universal design. Yes, Moat on Google Forms. Moat and a few other tools allow to allow students to read. There are a few others for providing feedback via voice. Mode is one, Vocaroo is another. These are all things that you can install into various either Google products or others to allow text to speech and whatnot. So that's the other thing to keep in mind, is that this wasn't a tool. I tried to show a few tools. There are tons of tools. A couple other things that you want to consider when you're researching these is, are they free? What do you get for free? What type of data do they harvest if they are free? Because nothing is free for sure. And if you get some buy-in from your colleagues, either at the grade level or the building level, this is something that, hey, we all use the free version. Maybe you can make a case to your administration to purchase a school-wide license, or maybe a grade level license for people to use some of the tools into their advanced features. So a few others, again, if you're looking at the UDL guidelines, clicking on any of these, they are all linked. And so if you pick one, they usually give you some ideas to promote that particular checkpoint, is what they refer to it as. They also have research that backs it up, and some related checkpoints that they would also kind of fall in line with that. But again, I would really stress not only using the UDL guidelines website, but also Google at that point. You could easily Google, check a UDL checkpoint 7.1 and tool or technology, and a lot of those things will come up. Like I said, this is more of an overview for universal design and more of a philosophical approach to universal design, bringing in both not only just some low tech and no tech and architecture or classroom design, but also some technology tools. And again, as we conclude today, realize that we're trying to focus on the whole child, and that means all children and all learners. And that is one of the key points that we're trying to get across today, is to make sure that what you are when you are designing your lessons, start with that graphic early on in the presentation about where are my learners coming from, what do they bring to the table, both strengths and deficits, but also what potential barriers might be in the learning, and that can change from topic to topic. So if you're starting with that point and linking that to your learning goals, it's a lot easier to identify barriers and then work to find supports for that. So with that, I'd like to say thank you. Thanks you for coming today and spending a Friday with me. And as a reminder, I will put a link to the slide deck in the chat as well. When you do make a copy of that, or do view that in the future, the first thing I would do is click on that and then go to File, Make a Copy. So that way you have a copy of the presentation in your own Google Drive, just in case this disappears or changes are made for a future presentation. So we are, like I said, happy to have you today, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend and enjoy one of the last few weekends before you go back to school. And I hope you have a wonderful school year.